Okay, who's willing? Who's willing to share a gift they received they did not expect, did not ask for, and yet it turned out to be a real blessing? I'll just tell you what mine is. The example I gave my table a couple of years ago. My daughters, for Father's Day, gave me a pair of Crocs. And let me tell you something. People who know me, 100% of them think that I am not the type who would like Crocs. In fact, my wife warned them that I would never wear them. I love them. I've worn them out and got another pair. I wear them around the house. I wear them to the hardware store. I haven't worn them to work yet, but you know, I'm getting to the age where it doesn't matter what they think. I may do that one of these days. Anybody else? A gift you received that you did not expect and you didn't even ask for it, and yet it was a real blessing to you. What else? No. Oh, okay. Well, that would mean something to you because it must happen so rarely. So there we are. That's a rare thing, too, as well. Yeah. Yeah. Well, today we're going to talk about gifts in more than one way. We're going to talk about gifts received by one of the main characters in our story, and then the ultimate gift that God provides to those who believe. We're going to talk about resurrection. Let's do a little bit of background. If you were here last week, you know that Elijah's ministry has ended. He ascended to heaven in a whirlwind and a chariot of fire. Elisha is his successor. 1 Kings chapter 19, God tells Elijah to appoint Azazel and appoint Jehu and make as kings, and to make Elisha his successor. In various of his travels, he was helped out in Shunem by a woman who had no children. And if you may have read the background of this story, he was traveling around and he would have a meal at Shunem in her husband's house. And she told her husband, you know, this is a man of God, and he comes around and he might need a place to stay. Let's make a little room for him so he can spend the night if he needs to. And so the husband built an actual stone building. I mean, you know, it's kind of a fancy place. And so Elijah was staying there one time, and he felt like, well, maybe I should do something for these people. They've been so nice to me. And he asked the lady what she needed, and she said, I don't need anything. And this is important background to our story today. And so he asked his servant, well, what do you think she needs? And she said, well, she's childless, and you know, that's in that culture, in that time, that was not a good thing, right? So Elijah prophesied to her that she would have a son within a year, and it came to pass just as he prophesied. And she didn't ask for that blessing, but nevertheless it occurred. So that's where we start our discussion today, 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 18 through 22. The child grew, and one day he went out to his father, who was with the reapers. And he said to his father, my head, my head. His father told the servant, carry him to his mother. After the servant had lifted him up and carried him to his mother, the boy sat on her lap until noon, and then he died. I'll just stop for just a second. Okay, think about that for just a moment. I don't know whether any of you have ever experienced the death of a child. I know people that have, and I know all of you in the room know people that have. And in all honesty, let's just be honest, that's the worst thing. Okay? I mean, that's the worst thing. You know, we talk all the time about what we really want out of life and all of that. I think when you get it down right to its basic level, what we really want out of life is to go before our kids do. That's what we really want, right? But anyway, he died in her lap. She went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God. So she put him in Elisha's room that they had built, okay? And shut the door and went out. And she called her husband and said, please send me one of the servants. That tells us something about this family. They were well off. They had servants. And a donkey, so I can go to the man of God quickly and return. She didn't even tell her husband that the boy had died, but nevertheless, she tells him, "Give me a donkey." And if this family worked like things work in my family, when the wife asks for it, she gets it. That's the way it goes. And so he got her a donkey, and she took off to see him. So this is a significant loss. The background is this woman has placed her hope in God and supported his prophet. She has experienced the blessing, a son. But now the son is gone. Imagine that for a moment. A significant loss of something promised and precious to you. And we've all had that. We've all had deaths in the family. We've all had loss of, a property or your favorite car or something. Some kid runs it over, and there's always, everyone in the room has experienced loss. This is not unique to the Shunammite woman, okay? This is something we all know, and maybe in different degree. But this is a significant loss of something very important, some person very important to her. So we look at then her reaction. Was it denial? There's supposedly, 7 stages of grief, or is it 5? I can't remember. I know the first one's denial, right? That's the first one. Was it anger? Was it fear? Was it sadness? Was it depression? I think bargaining's one of them, I think. But her reaction is a little bit different. She doesn't, and those of you that have been to the Middle East, you know what I'm talking about. The culture of that time and that day, and even to this day, is when there's a death in the family, there's a lot of wailing going on. I mean, that's the women wail. That's a cultural thing that occurs even to this day in much of the Middle East. She didn't do any of that. That was not her reaction. Now, she probably was very sad. She probably was, all of that. But she hurries to find the prophet. Why? Why did she? Was it faith? Was it fear? Was it anger? Could it have been anger at the prophet for giving her something that was now taken away? You don't know, honestly. We don't know what it was. I mean, do you think that she honestly expected the prophet to restore him to life? Do you think that? I know some, if you read the Bible commentaries, some of them really pump up the idea of the faith that this woman must have had, how faithful she was to go to Elisha as soon as this happened and all of that. And there's probably an element of that. But it's hard for me to believe, to be perfectly honest, that she was expecting her son to be resurrected. That's just not consistent. That resurrection in the Bible is not a common thing. In fact, I think there were only 5 people who ever oversaw resurrection. Of course, we know Jesus did. We know that. And Elijah and Elisha, in this particular story, and Jesus and Peter and Paul. And I think that's it. I don't think there's anybody else. So you have 5 different people who are capable in the Bible of restoring life and resurrecting a dead person. And so that's a little unusual, I think. I don't think she necessarily expected him to resurrect her son. But it is interesting to evaluate and think about what her reaction was. Her reaction immediately was to seek out what she described as the man of God. And so and this is not on the screen because I forgot to put it there, but let's just talk for a few minutes at our table about what is your reaction, what is your immediate reaction when something happens that either makes you angry or makes you sad or makes you feel a sense of loss. When you have a sense of loss, what is your immediate reaction? Let's talk about that for just a few minutes. Well, the clock on the wall says we got to keep going, even though many of you are having a good discussion, and I appreciate that. Let's take a vote. You've read what we've read so far. How many of you think that the lady expected Elijah to resurrect her son? Raise your hand. We got a couple, 3, 4. And it may be that that's what she thought, but let's be honest. We've all experienced personal loss. And when you lose a member of the family, do you really think that God is going to resurrect this person? I don't think that's the initial response. In her case, she was a little different because she had had direct dealings with a miracle worker. Okay, so they may well have had that. She may well have had that attitude. What in the world are you doing, telling me or giving me? Although Elisha didn't do it, giving me a son and then taking him away. Come on, what are you doing? She may have been going to tell him off, but she may have had, obviously she was acting out of some form of faith. I think that's right. Well, let's take a look then. She saddled the donkey. By the way, we didn't read verse 23 in which she was confronted by somebody and she said, "That's all right." And then she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, "Lead on, don't slow down for me unless I tell you." So she set out and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. When he saw her in the distance, the man of God said to his servant Gehazi, "Look, there's the Shunammite." And we don't know what tone of voice he used. This was a wealthy lady who could afford to build him a room and feed him when he was coming through. He probably felt some gratitude, but on the other hand, this is a wealthy lady who's used to getting her own way. Maybe there was a little bit of, maybe he said, "Oh my, there she is. There's the Shunammite." We don't know. We don't know, but he knows she's coming. By the way, Shunem is the modern-day Sulem in northern Israel, and it's probably, 20 miles or so from Mount Carmel. It's not that far, to be honest, but anyway, on a donkey it would take a while. This picture here is a famous painting done by Pieter Lastman in 1620. He was a Dutch painter, and the title of this is "The Prophet Ezekiel Confronting the Shunammite Woman." That's the title of it. She appears, you can see the donkey in the background, and she's kneeling, which the story, which we'll kind of skip over, but the story does express that she was very submissive to him when she came. The thing about Pieter Lastman that is most significant is he was a famous painter that taught other painters, including Rembrandt. So that's the reason people remember him, because he was Rembrandt's teacher. Elisha is an interesting prophet. The descriptions of him in Scripture suggest a very aloof nature. He was appointed as successor to Elijah. We mentioned that in 1 Kings 19:16. One of the tasks that he was going to be given was to destroy those who escaped the sword of Jehu. We don't think about prophets having that kind of power or authority or that kind of assignment. But that was his assignment. Jehu was the king of Israel, the northern kingdom, and he was going to kill a bunch of people that, well, there were a lot of people in the northern kingdom who probably deserved to be gone. Maybe that wasn't the method. But anyway, Jehu was going to do it. And the prophet Elisha was tasked with cleaning up with that, which is an interesting thing. He had a checkered past. At one point, he had cursed a bunch of children who were making fun of him because of his bald head. I'm looking over here at some fellows in the corner of the room. And he cursed them, and they got attacked by a bunch of bears. Now, that's not a very positive thing, is it? A bunch of children? Can you imagine children not acting right? I mean, that's unbelievable, isn't it? Well, anyway, And in 2 Kings 4, when he gave the woman the prophecy that she would have a child, if you read that section, which we didn't, but I encourage you to go back and read that, he doesn't actually even talk to her directly. He asks his servant, Gehazi, what do you, call the woman, and the woman comes and he says, "What do you need?" Or he tells Gehazi, "Ask her what she needs." And she tells Gehazi, I need nothing. I'm accepted by my own people. And so he doesn't even talk to her directly, which is kind of strange. And then she leaves, and then he asks Gehazi, well, what do you think she needs? Well, she's a barren woman. She's childless. So then he makes this prophecy that she'll have a child. He promises something she did not ask for. Now, she was happy to have it. I don't misunderstand me, but she didn't ask for it. A child. Verses 23 and 24, which we don't read, they include, or maybe 27, they include a statement by the woman, it's all right. She's challenged as she's leaving, and she tells the person challenging her, it's all right. Well, it wasn't all right. She didn't tell them why she was going to see the man of God at Mount Carmel. She didn't tell them that her son had died. She just tells them that's all right. She told no one about the death of the child, not even her husband, but it wasn't all right. When she reached Elisha, she was anguished and desperate. And this is a very common reaction in times of stress and difficulty and loss. We can all agree on that. So let's just spend a few minutes talking about when things go wrong. People fall usually into one of three categories. There may be more, but there's three that occur to me. One is they're a talker. When things go wrong, they're going to let everybody know about it. Okay? And sometimes that's the best way, and sometimes that's helpful. They could be an excuse maker. You know, when things go wrong, you're blaming somebody else or something else all the time. And then there's a hider, a person who doesn't tell anyone, keeps it all to themselves. So let's talk at the table what you think category you fall in and why you're that way. Let's talk about that. Well, there's a lot of good discussion going on, but we're going to have to move on if we're going to finish. So I guess we know who all the talkers were, right? The people that were talking at the table. The hiders said not a word, okay? I'm gonna call on someone right now, and she doesn't know I'm gonna do it, but she's particularly and uniquely qualified to answer this question. Kathy, you're a counselor, and so what do you normally encounter? Do you encounter hiders, talkers, or excuse makers? Which ones do you encounter most? Yeah. Yeah. I'm generally a hider myself. I got to be honest about that. I mean, look, it ain't anybody else's business. I mean, that's kind of my attitude about it. When I first got married 40 years ago, uh, I would come home from work. Most of you know I'm a lawyer. I practice law here in Dallas. I would come home from work, and my wife would, I think, dutifully, I'm not sure she was really interested, but she felt like she needed to ask me how my day went, what was going on at the office. And frankly, after spending all day at the office dealing with other lawyers who, let's face it, are not very good people. I mean, that's who I dealt with all day long, other lawyers. And most of them were jerks, and so I didn't want to talk about it when I got home. Even if there was a problem, I didn't want to talk about it. So finally, I guess about a year in, I said, look, I just don't even want to talk about it. And so now I'll go down to the courthouse, I'll try a case, I'll come home, she doesn't even ask me if I won, Well, this lady wasn't a hider, that's for sure. She was on her way to see Elijah. And her motivation we've talked a little bit about, but I think it's fair to say that her motivation was really faith. Now, once again, I'm not saying that she necessarily expected Elijah to restore life to her son. I think that's possible, of course, but it's also possible that she was wanting an explanation. And to get an explanation, she didn't just fire off and start cursing God, as many people would. How did God let this happen? Her first reaction was to seek the man of God because she wanted the word from God. And there's a lesson right there, regardless of what happens after this, there's a lesson right there that tells us how we should react in times of difficulty, in times of loss. We should seek what God has to say to us. We talk about faith. The Bible talks about faith a lot. Hebrews chapter 11. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. She was seeking God, and she was going to be rewarded, perhaps beyond her expectation. This woman demonstrated faith by seeking Elijah, the man of God. She was seeking God. Obviously, let's be fair, seeking God does not immunize a person from problems of life and from the presence of misfortune and death. It does not eliminate that. But it shows us, Scripture shows us, that faith is powerful. Here are some other verses. Hebrews 11:1. Faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Romans 8. Not only so, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit grown inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. Paul is saying, look, when you die, you're not going to be resurrected immediately, but you are going to be resurrected if you're a believer in Christ. For in this hope we were saved, but hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? But if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. Philippians chapter 1, verse 6, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus, the day of resurrection. So, when she gets there, she confronts him. Did I ask you for a son, my Lord? She said. Didn't I tell you, don't raise my hopes? Elijah said to Gehazi, tuck your cloak into your belt, take my staff in your hand, and run. Don't greet anyone you meet. And if anyone greets you, do not answer. Lay my staff on the boy's face. But the child's mother said, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. That may sound familiar to some of you. We'll talk about it in a moment. So he got up and followed her. Gehazi went on ahead and laid the staff on the boy's face, but there was no sound or response. So he went back to meet Elisha and told him, the boy has not awakened. When Elisha reached the house, they were following him. There was the boy lying dead on his couch. He went in, shut the door on the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. He got on the bed, lay on the boy, mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hands. As he stretched himself on him, the boy's body grew warm. Elisha turned away and walked back and forth in the room, and then got on the bed and stretched out on him once more. The boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Elisha summoned Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite. They never named this woman, by the way. I don't mean the Shunammite. And he did. And when she came, he said, take your son. She came in, fell at his feet, bowed to the ground. She took her son and went out. This next one is a painting by Benjamin West. He was an American artist, born in 1738. He mainly did history. He moved to England in the about 1766, and he was in England during the Revolution, and he became a court painter for King George III. And he was very famous for doing all kinds of historical paintings of British events, like the death of General Wolfe and others like that. I mean, that's a $1 jillion painting if you could ever get a hold of it. But this picture is Elisha healing the son of the Shunammite woman. That's the one he did here. He painted this in 1766. The key message here is God is merciful, and God has the power to overcome death. He certainly has the power to overcome death in this life, but his real power to overcome death is in events to come, when Jesus' reign is restored over the entire earth. And we're studying about this right now in service in the book of Revelation. I want to just go back to something the woman said when she came to meet Elisha. She said, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. That's exactly the same phrase that was used by Elisha when he was walking alongside of the Jordan River with Elijah. He said it twice. Elijah told him, why don't you wait here and I'll go with, no, I will not leave you. And that's exactly the same phrase that was used. I think it had some impact on Elisha. Whatever the result would eventually be, this woman determined to demonstrate faith in the situation. And she may have gone to Elijah and she may have said, why in the world did you tell me this? Why did this happen? And Elisha may have been able to explain to her what was going on, what was happening, and not raised her child. But she sought the Lord in this circumstance. That's the lesson of the day. She determined that she had faith in the man of God, and thus she had faith in God no matter what. And that's not an easy lesson to actually put into application, but it is one that will make your life so much more meaningful if you actually live by that code. Have faith in God no matter what. This picture here is taken, I don't know, a couple years ago in the village of Sulim. And this is a Hebrew sign, and I can't read it. But anyway, what it is, it's one of the walls of the house of the Shunammite woman. It probably isn't, right? But what's interesting about when you go to Israel, there's this kind of stuff everywhere. I mean, it's all over. And I think even if it's not exactly the right place or location or the original wall, which doesn't look like it to me, even if that's not it, the place acquires meaning. It acquires meaning because people go there and they remember and they quote Scripture. I actually got this off of a Jewish rabbi's website. He had a story he has a blog, and he was blogging about the Shunammite woman, and this is where this picture came from, and this place is revered today. Let's go on. Let's go to Mark 5, the story of Jairus' daughter. We're going to go through this quickly. One of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came and he saw Jesus and fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, my little daughter is dying. Come and put your hands on her so she will be healed and live. So Jesus went with him. And then there's an interruption here because this is where the hem of his robe was caught by the woman, and he ends up healing her. But then we skip down to verse 35. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother the teacher anymore. Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." And they laughed. It makes you wonder what kind of mourners they really were if they were laughing, even at a joke, but it wasn't a joke. After he put them all out, you can understand why, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up. Quit this, get up," Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told her to give her something to eat. She's probably hungry. Now, that is a miracle all of you are familiar with. You all know about it. Here's a picture by Vasil Patanov, who was a Russian painter in 1871. This is a painting that's actually, at one time, was hung in the hall in St. Petersburg, where they have jillions of these pictures, but now I think it's in a museum in France somewhere. Here he is, Jesus healing the daughter of Jairus. The entirety of Christian faith rests on one thing: the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's the core belief of the Christian faith. If there's no resurrection, we're wasting our time. It's not a common thing. I think I said this before. Elijah, Elisha, Jesus, Peter, and Paul ever oversaw such an event. It's the very uniqueness and unbelievableness, if that's even a word, of this event that sets apart Christian belief. Christian belief requires faith. It does not require rote action, rote demonstration of some kind of outward physical devotion. You don't have to go burn a goat or something anymore. That's not Christianity. That's other religions, Judaism and others. This is the thing that sets Christianity apart: resurrection. And that day is coming for all of those who believe in Jesus Christ. You will be resurrected. Let's talk. We got a few minutes. I didn't leave enough time, but you may have to pick some of these out. Review the two resurrection stories we looked at today. What are the similarities and differences? What are the necessary elements of both? Since we know God can defeat death, how should we approach death? Do you ever resist joy, peace, and hope that God provides? How do you avoid resisting that? And then have someone read Isaiah 25, 8 through 9. I think that would be helpful. How do we instill this truth into ourselves when life gets in the way? Isaiah 25, 8 through 9. Let's spend the balance of the hour in discussion at our tables, and I'll be back up.